pretty slick.
Hey guys, hello gorgeous. Hope you all had a relaxing holiday season and are recharged for another year. The first special missions request this year comes from general level patron Shane O. I talk a lot about characters on my channel, the strength, courage, intensity, and resolve that so many 80s animated characters represented for me and still inspire me with to this day. But this particular video isn't about what's beneath the surface. This time I'm taking a look at the surface itself. You see, before we were adults and could recognize these virtues in our heroes, many of us were drawn to the awesome designs of the characters before we knew anything about them. So today's video is the top 5 most gorgeous toys of the 80s Toy Museum. I consider my collection to not only be toys, but art as well. And here's a look at 5 of my favorite pieces of vintage plastic art from the 80s. Let's start out with one of the lesser known lines, but one of the prettiest. It's Sectaurs by Coleco. Although there was a short animated series based on the toys, I never knew about it until decades later, and I never read any of the comics either, so I had no idea who any of these guys were. I just knew they looked amazing. Released in 1985, they were a big contrast to the other popular toy lines of the 80s. Although He-Man and the Masters of the Universe had somewhat of a creepy factor to it, Sectaurs took it to the extreme, while still maintaining beautiful designs and paint applications. The figures were more realistically proportioned than Masters of the Universe, and featured elegant golden and silver antennae, and wonderful dark wash airbrushing on the bodies to accentuate the musculature. Arms and legs were also on ball joints, which provided more posing options than the stoic articulation of vintage Star Wars figures. The best of the bunch for me was Dargon and his Dragon Flyer. The Big Bug also featured the lovely black wash airbrushing over top of a gorgeous metallic blue paint, a satchel with the same beautiful detailing Sectaurs figures had on their belts and harnesses, gleaming black fur around where Dargon would sit, and check out these eyes. Translucent blue with metallic airbrush specks. The wings were clear, but featured some subtle pearlescent pink and green gleam to them depending on how the light hit it. Truly one of the most beautifully designed and executed toy lines of the 80s, if you take a closer look. Next up is Man and Machine, Power Extreme.
Power Extreme!
Kenner's Centurions from 1986. I've always been a big fan of robots, androids, and cyborgs, so Centurions was right up my alley. Rather than riding in a vehicle, the Centurions merged with their vehicles, creating powerful-looking, souped-up versions of themselves. My favorite of all of them was Max Ray's Depth Charger.
Crystal Kane to Skyvault computer. Beam down Depth Charger to Max Ray at these coordinates.
Power Extreme!
The box didn't feature any windows, but did feature some custom artwork on the front similar to G.I. Joe art, and also featured pictures of the actual toy on a seabed. Love those toys gone wild. Max's exosuit really popped. A bright green that almost looked like it glowed in the dark, contrasted by black accents. Depth Charger itself was packed with all sorts of mechanical detail and featured my favorite color, orange, with yellow which accents the orange nicely. It was big and bulky with large pontoons, forward missiles, and a huge rear sea mine, but still looked sleek and streamlined for cruising through the water. And I've always been a fan of vehicles with clear canopies, so we got to look at Max's $1 million smile and $1 billion mustache. Number 3 is an offering from Kenner. Wings of Silver, Nerves of Steel. I'm a sucker for chrome, and these guys are gorgeous. Gleaming 80s chrome from head to toe. The art on the packaging may not have been as inspired as G.I. Joe card art, but the figures almost popped off the bubble when I'd see them on the pegs. Even the partially chromed figures like Stargazer were eye-catching with the limited use of chrome. The tints of gold, blue, copper, and other colored chromes are all beautiful, but my favorite is Silver. Quicksilver, that is. Reminds me of the T-1000, smooth as mercury. He also featured pop-out wings, which were a silver material that caught the light nicely as well. This guy's all about catching the light and throwing it right back in your face. Simple but elegant design on the body too. And I love the little green Silverhawks insignia on the chest. Great detail in that as well. The chrome would unfortunately wear off if you played around with it too much, making Quicksilver one of the first look but don't touch display pieces of the 80s rather than an action figure. Number 4 begets the line with holograms that gleam and shine. It's the Knights of the Magical Light, Hasbro's Visionaries.
Whispered secrets of a shattered age, I summon you, renew this sage!
It's all about the holograms here. The figures came with staffs that featured beautiful 3D images of animals or mystic characters that glowed in the light, as well as chest totems. Even the bad guys, whose staves and chest totems featured creepy-looking creatures and characters, had a Tolkien-style grace and intrigue to them. And the vehicles had even larger holograms, although they were prism-style instead of 3D. The great thing about Visionaries is it required movement to appreciate the full effect of the hologram. The images of the staves would appear from nothingness and change from one creature to another with changing light or perspective, and then disappear again. A wonderful toy line that blended medieval chivalry with poetry and 3D holograms.
A whim, thought, and more is sought. Awake my mind, thy will be wrought!
And while this list is in no particular order, I'm sure Joe fans will say I saved the best for last. It's America's daring, highly trained Special Mission Force, G.I. Joe.
Now you're cooking with gas.
Going to a toy store was like going to an art museum when Joes hung from the pegs in the 80s. Instead of the typical smiling visages most toys would get, the Joes all had grit, focus, and determination etched on their faces. And the images used weren't cartoon-looking. They were almost photorealistic, which made the figures even more impressive, because almost all of the detail you'd see on the card art carried over onto the design of the figure. Many of the early figures maintained an OD green motif to provide a unified-looking unit, but as they went on, more detail was added, such as detail on the web belts, pins and medals, harnesses, weapons, and texture added to clothing. While I loved all of the steely grit added to the Joes' faces on their cards, my favorite was the man with no expression, 1985's Snake Eyes. Dressed in all black, the light gray wolf timber provided a yin and yang balance, and also featured some great sculpting detail on the fur and fangs. While the original Snake Eyes was famous for not being able to afford any paint apps, the 1985 update got to dip into some of Hasbro's fortune. But the paint apps were thankfully subtle. Very dark gray was used for the molded weapons and belts, which maintained his dark look, and a silver wrist arrow for just a little bit of zing. The black is glossy too, almost like a black chromed Silverhawk. I lost the original backpack years ago, but gave him Quick Kick's sword and backpack, as it goes nicely with the dark gray accents on the body, and the sword goes well with the silver wrist arrow. It's all about creating a flow of unity, whether it's with color or with tone. While I played with all of my Joes as a kid, 85 Snake Eyes was the first figure I can remember striking a pose and displaying him, just appreciating how cool the design looked. Honorable mention goes to Super Trooper though, gotta love that chrome. So that's my top 5 most gorgeous 80s toys. What's yours? Scroll down and go to town. If you want to support the channel, visit my Patreon page in the show notes. Rewards include sneak peeks to upcoming videos, invites to upcoming cartoon commentary videos, and a one-on-one chat with me on this channel about all things 80s. Thanks to everyone who joined the Patreon page so far. You folks have made a big difference and it's greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching, share if you liked the video, and to join the tribe, hit subscribe. Nerdmaste!